I never believed in angels until that night in the abandoned church. Blood trickled down my arm as I collapsed onto the dusty floor, my body weak from 3 days without food. The darkness felt like a physical weight pressing against my chest. This is how it ends, I thought, closing my eyes as the last of my strength drained away. What happened next defies explanation. 3 simple words spoken in that empty sanctuary completely rewired my reality. If someone had told me an encounter with an angel would transform my entire existence, I would have laughed. But those 3 words altered everything, and I'm finally ready to share why. My name is Michael Thornton, and I'm 58 years old. I've spent most of my life in Johannesburg, South Africa, where I worked as a mining engineer for over 30 years. Nothing in my practical, logical career prepared me for what I experienced. Before I continue with my testimony, please write in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story is reaching, because what I'm about to share isn't just my story. It might explain things you've felt but couldn't understand. I was raised in a religious household, but by my 40s, I'd abandoned faith entirely. Science, facts, and tangible evidence were my gods. My wife, Sarah, had passed away from cancer 5 years earlier, leaving me bitter and hollow. Our 2 children had moved overseas, and I'd gradually severed those connections too, building walls around myself that no one could penetrate. The mining company I dedicated my life to announced sudden bankruptcy in 2019. 3 decades of loyalty ended with a pathetic severance package and a cheap retirement watch. Within 6 months, I drained my savings on bad investments and alcohol, lots of alcohol. The man who once prided himself on precision and control was now sleeping in his car, turning down help from former colleagues out of stubborn pride. Depression isn't just sadness, it's a crushing void that consumes logic and hope. I started hearing Sarah's voice at night, hallucinations brought on by grief and malnutrition. Doctors later told me I was experiencing extreme psychosis from withdrawal and starvation. But what happened next doesn't fit any medical explanation. On September 14th, a date forever etched in my memory, I broke into an abandoned church on the outskirts of Johannesburg. Not to pray, I wanted a sheltered place to die. 3 days without food or water had left me delirious. I'd cut my arm breaking in through a window, and infection was setting in. The fever made the stained glass windows dance with colors even in the midnight darkness. What I didn't know was that someone else was already inside that church, waiting for me. The first indication I wasn't alone came as a subtle shift in the air, like the pressure change before a thunderstorm. My skin tingled despite the fever, and the hair on my arms stood upright. I remember thinking it was just my failing body's last electrical misfires. Then came the light, not bright or blinding as you might expect, but gentle, like dawn filtering through morning mist. It emanated from the corner near the dilapidated altar, slowly taking form. I blinked repeatedly, convinced my dehydrated brain was manufacturing hallucinations to comfort me before death. "I've been waiting for you, Michael," a voice said, not echoing as you'd expect in an empty church, but somehow both whispered and perfectly clear, as if spoken directly into my mind, while simultaneously filling the room. I tried to stand, but collapsed back onto the dusty pews. The figure approached, and what I saw defies conventional description. It wasn't the white-robed, winged being from Sunday school illustrations. This presence appeared almost translucent, shifting between defined human form and patterns of light that seemed to fold into dimensions I couldn't comprehend. "You're not real," I managed to say, my voice cracking from dehydration. "You're my brain shutting down." The being sat beside me, though "sat" isn't entirely accurate. It was more like the space next to me was suddenly occupied. "Is that what you need to believe, Michael?" it asked with something like compassion in its voice. I laughed bitterly. "What I need is irrelevant. I'll be dead by morning." That's when it touched my infected arm, and the pain that had been my constant companion vanished instantly, not gradually fading, but completely gone between one heartbeat and the next. The being, which I could now see, had features that shifted between masculine and feminine, young and ancient, spoke again. "Your suffering is self-imposed." I recoiled at this. "My wife died in agony. My career was stolen. My children are gone. How is that self-imposed?" Anger gave my voice strength I didn't know I still possessed. "You chose isolation over connection, protection over vulnerability, certainty over faith." Each word struck like a physical blow. "You're not here by accident, Michael." Suddenly, memories flooded my consciousness, not just recalled, but relived. Sarah asking me to pray with her during her final days, and my refusal. My daughter calling on her birthday, and me cutting the conversation short. Colleagues offering support, and my cold rejection. Each instance of pushing away connection played before me like a film I couldn't stop. "Why are you showing me this?" I demanded, tears streaming down my face for the first time in years. "Because you need to see what I see," the being replied. Light seemed to pulse from it in rhythm with my heartbeat. "And what exactly do you see?" I asked, simultaneously dreading and desperate for the answer. That's when it spoke the three words that would permanently alter my existence. Unfinished divine purpose. Unfinished divine purpose. The words hung in the air, almost visible in the strange light surrounding us. I wanted to dismiss them, to cling to my rational disbelief, but something profound resonated in my very bones. "What does that even mean?" I asked, suddenly aware that my voice was stronger, my thinking clearer than it had been in months. The being, which I now understood was indeed what humans have always called an angel, extended what appeared to be a hand, though it seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. "Your life was never meant to be a straight line from birth to death, Michael. It's a convergence point, where multiple realities and possibilities meet. As our hands connected, the decrepit church dissolved around us. We stood in what I can only describe as a vast, interconnected web of light, each junction pulsing with energy. "These are lives you've touched," the angel explained. "And these," it indicated darker strands running through the web, "are the connections you severed." I saw Sarah's strand, vibrant despite ending abruptly. My children's threads stretched forward into futures I couldn't see. Most shocking were the thousands of smaller connections, people I'd barely noticed, brief encounters I'd forgotten, strangers whose paths crossed mine. "I don't understand," I whispered, overwhelmed by the vast network surrounding us. "No one ever fully does," the angel said with something like kindness. "But understanding isn't required for purpose." The angel showed me specific points in the web, moments where my expertise in mining had saved lives through safety protocols I'd implemented. Communities that had clean water because of extraction techniques I'd pioneered. Engineers I'd mentored who went on to develop crucial infrastructure in developing nations. "But I lost everything," I protested. "Whatever good I did is in the past." "Time doesn't work how you perceive it," the angel replied. "Past, present, future. These are limited human constructs. Your purpose exists beyond them." The angel then revealed something that still haunts and inspires me equally. 3 specific children, not yet born, whose lives would be saved by knowledge only I possessed. A geological formation under a planned community that would collapse without intervention. My expertise was needed, but not just my knowledge. My lived experience of loss and redemption was equally vital. "Why me?" I asked, the question that has echoed through human encounters with the divine since time began. "Because only you have traveled this exact path," the angel answered. "Only you carry this specific combination of knowledge, pain, and potential." The 3 words, unfinished divine purpose, weren't just a platitude. They were a key unlocking a door I hadn't known existed. As the cosmic vision faded and the dilapidated church rematerialized around us, the angel's form became more defined. I could now see it clearly, neither male nor female, yet somehow both, with eyes containing what looked like galaxies swirling in their depths. "You have a choice to make, Michael Thornton," it said, its voice taking on a resonance that vibrated through the broken pews. "Accept your purpose or continue your current path." That's hardly a choice, I said, attempting sarcasm despite my trembling voice. Live or die? No, the angel corrected firmly. The choice is between existing without purpose or living with divine intention. Death comes to everyone eventually. Purpose is what transcends it. I felt a sudden weight in my pocket. Reaching in, I found a small stone that emitted the same gentle light as the angel. What's this? A reminder, it said. When doubt returns, and it will, hold this and remember this conversation. The challenge laid before me wasn't simply survival. It was something infinitely more difficult, to re-enter a world I'd rejected, reconnect with people I'd pushed away, and pursue a purpose I didn't fully comprehend. What if I fail? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. The angel's response was not what I expected. You already have many times. You will again. Failure is part of the human experience, but it's not the conclusion. I spent that night in the church, but not as I'd planned, not dying, but beginning to live again. The infection in my arm had completely healed, leaving not even a scar. My hunger and thirst remained, but I had strength I couldn't explain. At dawn, I walked 8 kilometers to the nearest town and used my last coins to call my daughter in Australia. When she answered, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I apologized. Through tears, I asked if I could visit. Her hesitation was palpable, but she said yes. What followed was the hardest journey of my life, harder than grief, harder than bankruptcy, harder than homelessness. I had to face the wreckage I'd created and rebuild connections I'd systematically destroyed. My son initially refused to speak to me. Former colleagues responded with skepticism to my attempts at reconciliation. The small, glowing stone remained in my pocket, a constant reminder when doubt threatened to overwhelm me. Sometimes in the darkest moments, I'd feel it grow warm, pulsing slightly like a heartbeat. 3 months after my encounter, I received a call from a former mining colleague. A development company was planning a residential complex outside Johannesburg. Something about the geological surveys didn't look right, but they couldn't pinpoint the issue. Would I consult? I recognized the location immediately. It was one of the 3 places the angel had shown me. This was the beginning of my purpose unfolding. The residential development would have been built over an unstable fault line that my specialized experience helped identify. The company reluctantly changed locations, incurring significant costs, but ultimately saving countless lives. Most remarkably, the alternative location they chose resulted in the discovery of a clean water aquifer that now supplies 3 communities. As my reputation for this kind of specialized consultation grew, I received an invitation to speak at a conference in Sydney, just miles from where my daughter lived. Our reunion was tentative, fragile, but real. She introduced me to my grandchildren, whom I'd never met. My grandson had my eyes. My granddaughter had Sarah's laugh. Dad, my daughter said after dinner that night, what happened to you? You're different. I considered telling her everything about the abandoned church, the angel, the cosmic web of connections. Instead, I simply said, I remembered I have an unfinished purpose. She studied me carefully. Whatever it is, I'm glad. We thought we'd lost you forever. You almost did, I admitted, but something found me instead. Today, 5 years after that night in the church, I've reconnected with both my children. I've helped identify 7 potentially catastrophic structural issues in various development projects. I've mentored young engineers who approach their work with an awareness of how their decisions affect human lives. The glowing stone gradually faded until it became ordinary again, its purpose complete once mine was fully embraced. I keep it on my desk as a reminder. I've never seen the angel again, at least not in the same form. But sometimes, when I'm reviewing geological surveys or reconnecting with someone I've wronged, I feel that familiar pressure change in the air, a gentle reminder that my story continues beyond what I can see. The 3 words, unfinished divine purpose, have become my mantra, not in a religious sense, though I've made peace with faith again, but as a practical framework for living. Every person I encounter, every project I consult on, every relationship I rebuild is part of a divine tapestry I can't fully comprehend, but am privileged to contribute to. Just when I thought my angelic experiences were complete, something happened last year that proved me wrong. I was in Namibia, consulting on a water project in a drought-stricken region. After a long day surveying potential drill sites, I decided to walk alone into the desert to watch the sunset. The Namibian desert holds a silence unlike anywhere else on Earth, a silence so complete you can hear the blood rushing in your veins. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sand in shades of amber and gold, I felt that familiar pressure change. This time, there was no light, no visible manifestation, just a voice beside me, as clear as if someone stood there, though I saw no one. "The stone," it said. "What did you learn from it?" I reached into my pocket where I still carried the now ordinary pebble. "That reminders are temporary," I answered. "Eventually, the lesson becomes part of you." Laughter, gentle and musical, surrounded me. "You understand more than you think, Michael. Why have you returned?" I asked, my heart racing despite the calm I felt. "To show you the next chapter," the voice replied. Suddenly, the desert around me transformed. Not into the cosmic web I'd seen before, but into a future version of the very spot where I stood. I saw a thriving community, children playing around a central well, crops growing in soil once thought barren, and at the center, a school built beside the water source. "This doesn't exist," I whispered. "Not yet," the voice confirmed, "but it will, through the water you help them find tomorrow." "I'm just a consultant," I protested. "I identify potential drill sites. I don't stay to build communities." "Purpose evolves, Michael. The water is just the beginning." As quickly as it came, the vision vanished, leaving me alone in the darkening desert. The following day, against all geological probability, we discovered an aquifer that could sustain thousands. Within months, the first families began settling near the new water source. I didn't leave as planned. Instead, I stayed, using my savings to help establish infrastructure. Those 3 words, unfinished divine purpose, expanded beyond my expertise to encompass something I'd never imagined for myself, becoming part of a community again. The most skeptical people often ask me for proof of my encounters. They want physical evidence, something tangible beyond my testimony. For years, I had nothing except the changed trajectory of my life and the faded stone I carried. But last Christmas, something happened that defies rational explanation. My son, who had finally reconnected with me after years of estrangement, invited me to spend the holidays with his family in London. On Christmas Eve, we attended a service at Westminster Abbey, my first time in a formal church since my encounter in the abandoned one. As the choir sang, my 7-year-old granddaughter tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa," she whispered, pointing to the empty space beside me in the pew. "Why is that person made of light?" My blood froze. I slowly turned, seeing nothing but feeling that unmistakable pressure change. "What person, sweetheart?" "The shiny one next to you. They're smiling at you." She said it so matter-of-factly, the way children do when describing something obvious. Later that night, as I tucked her into bed, she handed me a drawing, a crude, childish sketch of a figure made of swirling lines with what looked like stars inside it. In the corner, she'd written 3 words, "Unfinished divine purpose." "Ah, where did you hear those words?" I asked, my hands trembling. She shrugged. "The light person told me to tell you. They said you'd understand." My son found me weeping in the hallway, clutching the drawing. When I finally explained everything to him, the abandoned church, the angel, the visions, and now his daughter's experience, I expected disbelief or concern for my mental health. Instead, he said something that shocked me. "Dad, the night before Mom died, she told me she'd seen someone made of light at the foot of her bed. They promised her you wouldn't be alone forever. I thought it was the medication talking." These connections, these impossible, unexplainable threads between experiences, continue to unfold in my life. not as constant dramatic interventions, but as subtle reminders that reality is far more complex and beautiful than we typically perceive. People often ask if I'm absolutely certain I wasn't hallucinating that night in the church. After all, I was starving, dehydrated, feverish from infection. Wouldn't a medical professional attribute everything to delirium? I understand the skepticism. I shared it for most of my life. But I pose this question in return. Can delirium predict specific geological formations I had no prior knowledge of? Can hallucinations manifest in a child's drawing years later? Can psychosis heal an infected wound instantly? The mathematician in me, the engineer who spent decades trusting only what could be measured, has surrendered to a simple truth. Some experiences transcend our current frameworks for understanding. I don't ask anyone to believe my account. Belief is deeply personal, formed through our own experiences rather than someone else's testimony. What I do ask is that you remain open to moments when your reality might expand beyond your existing paradigms. The most profound scientific discoveries throughout history came when researchers encountered anomalies that didn't fit existing models. The same applies to our personal cosmologies. The most unexpected outcome of my angelic encounter has been its effect on others. When I cautiously began sharing my experience with select individuals, I discovered something remarkable. My story gave them permission to acknowledge their own unexplainable moments. A geologist colleague confessed that during a cave exploration in his 20s, he'd been trapped by a collapse. As oxygen dwindled, he saw what he could only describe as a being of light that led him to an exit that wasn't on any map. He'd never told anyone, fearing professional ridicule. A nurse at my granddaughter's school described being guided by an unseen presence to check on a seemingly stable patient, arriving just as the patient suffered a massive, silent heart attack that would have been fatal without immediate intervention. These stories, shared hesitantly, often with tears, suggest that such encounters are more common than our rationalist culture acknowledges. Most people simply lack safe contexts to share them without judgment. I've come to believe that angels, or whatever we choose to call them, interact with humanity far more frequently than we realize. Most encounters go unreported, dismissed as imagination, coincidence, or stress. Yet they leave indelible marks on those who experience them. As I share this experience with you now, I wonder how many of you have felt something similar, a nudge toward purpose you can't explain, a sense that your life contains significance beyond your daily routine. Perhaps you've even had your own encounters with messengers you couldn't fully comprehend. These experiences aren't reserved for special people or those with perfect lives. Quite the opposite. They often find us in our darkest moments, when we've exhausted our own resources and capabilities. The message I received wasn't that I was chosen because of my strength, but precisely because of my brokenness. The cracks in our lives aren't flaws to be hidden. They're channels through which light enters, illuminating purposes we couldn't otherwise perceive. I don't share this to convince anyone of angels or supernatural experiences. Your belief or disbelief doesn't change what happened to me. But I do hope my story might help you recognize moments of divine intervention in your own life. Those pivotal points where something inexplicable shifts your trajectory. Ask yourself, what relationships have I severed that might be part of my unfinished purpose? What knowledge or experience do I possess that might save or transform lives? What darkness in my past might actually be preparing me for my most important contribution? The 3 words, unfinished divine purpose, weren't meant just for me. I believe they apply to everyone. Each life represents a unique convergence of experience, knowledge, and potential that cannot be replicated. Your purpose might not be revealed through an angelic visitation, but it exists nonetheless, waiting to be recognized and embraced. I've received hundreds of emails from people who've had similar experiences after sharing my story at conferences. One woman in Brazil discovered her purpose was protecting indigenous land rights after an encounter during a hiking accident. A doctor in Canada completely transformed his practice after what he described as a visitation during a moment of profound burnout. If anything in my story resonates with your experience, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to recognize their own divine encounters. Next week, I'll be sharing an even more remarkable account from a fisherman in Alaska who was stranded during a blizzard and encountered not one, but 3 angelic beings who revealed something about our collective future that will shake you to your core. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Remember, your darkest moment might be the backdrop against which your greatest purpose becomes visible. Those 3 words, unfinished divine purpose, weren't just for me. They might be for you too. Share this video with someone who might need this message today. Sometimes we become unknowing messengers ourselves, delivering divine timing through a simple act of sharing.